Hype for Texas reached an all-time high going into this season. They were ranked preseason number 1 for the first time in program history and had a quarterback favored to win the Heisman. Unfortunately, the preseason proved to be the peak of the mountain. Since then, Texas has been free-falling. They went from number 1 to unranked in only 5 weeks, and Arch Manning has struggled more than anyone imagined. When Texas beat Oklahoma and regained a ranking, it looked like the bleeding had finally stopped. But after narrowly beating Kentucky and having to pull off a miraculous comeback just to get past Mississippi State, Texas once again looks hopeless. But that might not be true. When fans saw Texas down 17 in the fourth quarter, they saw the Longhorns' championship aspirations die. Texas, however, saw the turning point of their season. Texas isn't dead, and they still have a real shot at the national title. Let's start with the most obvious limiting factor that Texas has been dealing with: scoring. They simply haven't been putting enough points on the board, and the one most responsible is Arch Manning. He's looked uncomfortable in the pocket, holds the ball too long, and doesn't look like a quarterback who's been in a system for years, which he has. In his defense, the offensive line hasn't been stellar, but all things considered, going into the Mississippi State game, Arch was throwing for 207 yards per game, 1.7 touchdowns, and 0.7 interceptions. It wouldn't be fair to say he's played like one of the worst quarterbacks in the country, but those numbers aren't good. And it's not like he was playing better than his stats suggested. He looked rough, and if you didn't see his numbers, you'd probably assume they were even worse. It's also frustrating when you consider that he has plenty of talent around him, and several of his early matchups came against weaker opponents like UTEP and San Jose State. The thing is, when you have a talented team that's being held back by quarterback play, better quarterback performance can change everything. And we finally saw the first flash of that against Mississippi State. Arch had his best game of the season by far, throwing for 346 yards, 3 touchdowns, and only 1 interception. Most impressively, he played his best football at the end of the game when they needed him most. If Arch Manning can become the player he was in the fourth quarter of that game, the offense will look completely different moving forward. While the Texas offense has struggled for much of the year, the defense has been a completely different story. Texas started the season by holding Ohio State to just 14 points, even with the offense repeatedly punting the ball back to them. In that game, Ohio State finished with only 203 total yards of offense. It was hard for Texas fans not to come away from the game frustrated, considering the Longhorns only scored 7 points, but that frustration certainly didn't extend to the defense. Texas currently ranks 19th in total yards allowed per game, though that number is a bit misleading. Defensive stats can get inflated when an offense constantly stalls out, forcing the defense to spend extra time on the field. Their most recent outing, when the defense played its worst game of the year, also skewed that number, but I don't expect that to continue. There's too much talent on that side of the ball, and when they've played to their potential, they've looked like one of the best defenses in the country. The final piece that ties this all together for me is Steve Sarkeesian. I know things haven't gone smoothly for Texas this season, and I'm sure plenty of fans are questioning his play calling, decision making, and overall leadership. But I still believe Sark is a really good coach. He took a Texas program that was stuck in pretty good territory and turned it into an elite program. In the same way I wouldn't bet against Kirby Smart, I wouldn't bet against Steve Sarkeesian. He won 13 games last year and 12 the year before that. Texas may not be playing as well this year, but I believe they actually have a higher ceiling than they did last season. Quinn Ewers was a good quarterback, even though some fans wanted him benched for Arch Manning. While that clearly wasn't the right call at the time, it's fair to say that Arch has a higher ceiling than Ewers did. Arch hasn't played anywhere near that ceiling yet, but all the physical tools are there, and last week's game against Mississippi State was the closest he's come to reaching it. I believe Sarkeesian is the perfect coach to help Arch continue improving throughout the season. Quinn Ewers' development is a perfect example of that. Ewers threw for 2,177 yards his first year starting for Texas, and that number jumped all the way up to 3,479 the next season. Now, to be clear, Arch won't get a full offseason between games, but he's already had more time in Sark's system than Ewers did at that point. All Arch needs now are in-game reps, and we're starting to see what he can do with them. A team looking mediocre and then suddenly turning things around mid-season isn't something we haven't seen before. In fact, 2 teams did it just last year. Florida started 4-5 and then reeled off 4 straight wins to end the season, including upsets over number 22 LSU and number 9 Ole Miss, a team most people thought would make the playoff. South Carolina also started poorly, sitting at 3-3 after several heartbreaking losses, before rattling off 6 straight wins, including victories over number 10, number 23, and number 12. While Florida and South Carolina started their runs too late to make the playoff, Texas still has plenty of time. They haven't dug themselves nearly as deep a hole. It looked like they were heading that direction, but everything changed when they came back to beat Mississippi State. If they go on a 3 or 4 game run, they could easily climb right back into playoff contention. And if you think the loss to Florida proves Texas can't make a run, I'd remind you that Ohio State ended its regular season last year with a loss to Michigan. Ohio State looked awful that day, by far their worst performance of the season, and fans were even calling for Ryan Day's job. But Ohio State went on to win the national championship. The point is, losing to a talented but underperforming team like Michigan last year or Florida this year isn't something you can't recover from. Since NIL came into existence, rosters across college football haven't been as stacked or as dominant as they used to be. That's opened the door for more upsets. But with an expanded playoff field, teams have more room to bounce back from those upsets than ever before. Don't forget, Texas's only 2 losses are Ohio State and Florida. If Notre Dame can lose to Northern Illinois and then bounce back and make the national championship, then I think Texas is definitely still alive. Quick timeout. If you want more football breakdowns like this every week, make sure to hit that like and subscribe. This is a new channel and your support means a lot. Back to the video. It's also important to remember that Ohio State, the team most considered to be the clear-cut number 1 in the country, a team that hasn't lost a game and has won almost every game by a blowout, had their biggest challenge against Texas. Texas went on the road and still only lost by 7 in a game where they actually outgained Ohio State by 133 yards. Sure, they still lost, and I won't take anything away from Ohio State, but when you lose 14-7 on the road, get stopped twice at the goal line, and your quarterback is making his first ever career start, that's not a bad showing. It shows that Texas already has what it takes to compete with and potentially beat elite teams. So yes, I'm saying Texas can still win the championship. Most of you probably think that even making the playoffs at this point is a long shot, and I won't argue that it's an easy path. 3 of their last 4 games are against top 10 opponents. That's a brutal stretch, but if they can win 3 of those, they'll have a legitimate shot to get in. To win those games and ultimately play at a national championship level, they don't have to do anything they haven't already done this season. They just have to put it all together. They have the coach, they've shown the flashes of elite defense, and just last week we saw what Arch Manning and this offense are capable of when everything clicks. Put all 3 of those together, and you get a team that nobody wants to face. Not in November, and definitely not in January.